Today I got together with Jade and we had a discussion about anxiety. We arrived with no questions or pre-planned ideas of what we'd talk about. And so it was really lovely to feel that we were just having a relaxed conversation. We covered what anxiety is, what it looks like, and then what we can do about it for ourselves and for each other. So I hope you enjoy it and I hope that it's interesting and useful. And I honestly haven't thought of any questions. I haven't even thought what I might or might not say. It must be in my brain somewhere because we've had this.
Yeah, I was thinking last night about just what we'd kind of talk about and if there's anything particular I wanted to say. And I was thinking that I think anxiety as a whole as a word is really overused, so it's lost its importance, if that's the right word. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, we all get anxious in lots of scenarios, and so we tend to use that word quite a lot, and it is the right word to use, but I think people forget there's an extreme to some people's anxieties, and that's so I think when people say, oh, I struggle with anxiety or I'm feeling anxious, we tend to align it to our own sense of that word, if you know what I mean. So you think, well, when I feel anxious, I'm all right, I can still go out the house, I can still talk to people. But there's another extreme to that where some people can't go out the house because they're so anxious, and that's what I was thinking last night. Just how I'm not sure it's a word that people fully understand. When you say depression, particularly more so now, I think people go, oh, okay, yeah, I'm aware of it. I know people struggle with it, kind of understand it a bit more as more people talk about it. And I think anxiety is less known of how it impacts people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
In that it covers such a wide range from a little worry about something. And it's not, I don't think it's even a linear scale, like, because if you've got panic attacks, you've got that are really short, and then you've got underlying
general anxiety.
Yeah, that can be there all the time. And what do we mean? I say I'm really anxious. Is it? And I think so. There's that sense, and there's the general worrying and anxiousness. It's telling us something. It's a signal. So sometimes is it a health anxiety? Sort of, I'm worried about, I don't know,
a lump
across the road. So, or something, a health condition, thinking, oh, I don't feel very well and I'm worried that what that means, versus anxiety. I want to say in the clinical sense, but then I don't want to say that because that sort of pathologizes it. But an anxiety that has isn't related to something that's happening now, that relates to historic, how we are. And
I think sometimes you don't know that you're struggling with anxiety either, because it's going back to that range. It's not linear. There's so many symptoms, if that's the right word, that sometimes you don't, until someone says, oh, I feel like this and I've been struggling with anxiety, you go, oh actually, is that what I'm feeling? That heaviness on my chest, for instance, or whatever it might be. And I think there's sometimes because it's not really talked about in a, I was going to say extreme sense. I don't think extreme is the right word, but in a clinical sense, is that the right word? I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It's not.
Yeah, it's like the way we would talk about backache.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that muscular? Is it actually something wrong with my spine? And I completely relate to that, because I didn't know, and this is truly genuine, and it doesn't make sense to me now in hindsight, but I had this low-level anxiety that was permanent. I didn't even know it was there till I didn't have it. I suppose sometimes you can have that with a noise, can't you? Like white noise, and you don't know it's there. It's like that. And the thing is, the symptoms, what did I have? I went through a period in my life, I know it was in my 20s, where I had no appetite. And I could only eat toast. Like the thing that I could and I can't remember exactly how long it lasted, but it was more than just one day. I did lose weight, because you do when you don't have
Yeah.
any appetite.
Yeah.
And looking back, it makes sense that it was anxiety. And periods in my life, and I've got it now, and it's sort of a signal is rash. At the moment it's on my neck, but
Mm-hmm.
when I was doing my A levels, I had this on my fingers, and it will come up somewhere, and it's a signal. And I'm surprised. For me, I'm not quite sure why I have it on my neck. I know it's about worry, it's
Yeah.
anxiety, that it's a signal, because to tell me, look at what's going on.
But you only know that because of you've learnt that over time.
Yeah,
I imagine that
yeah.
first time you were like, oh my gosh, I've got a rash, and then that just adds to the anxiety, because then you're thinking, what's wrong? Why am I getting this rash? And it just adds and
I
builds.
used to get migraine too, and I remember going to the doctor about it. Oh no, sorry, that not about the migraine. You see, all these things, I had migraine, and being about anxiety, and and of course we've got stress as well, which is another plays into this. But the one where I was almost confusing it was, I had a problem with my breathing, and I went to the hospital. I had lots of tests, and I remember my GP saying to me, have you been worried? Because it wasn't asthma, it wasn't lots
Yeah.
of things. And now I know and have the information and knowledge about anxiety. I go, oh my God, all these things. And it was probably like the rash on my fingers and that I've got on my neck, actually inside.
Yeah, I don't think we
And
realise the range of ways anxiety can show itself, and I think
yeah,
you're right. Physical symptoms, particularly for me, when I'm feeling anxious, I get that really heavy feeling on my chest, where
right, yeah,
almost before, because I am asthmatic, so that feeling almost before I might have a asthma attack, for instance, where I really have to consciously think, right, take a breath, and just try and relax. But sometimes that's, I mean, for me, I that's probably the extreme of my anxiety. But I've got friends and family that can't stop it at that, and do go into that panic attack stage, or even
yeah,
further. And I think it's just that's probably why there's less awareness around anxiety and its impact, because the range of symptoms or results of it are so varied, because like you said, you've got a rash on your neck. Well, that could just be a rash on your neck, or it could be anxiety. So,
yeah,
or heaviness on my chest could be me about to have an asthma attack, or it could be my anxiety. There's so
or
it's
even
not,
a heart attack,
or even a heart attack, which hopefully it isn't. But it's, and I think that's why people struggle to understand anxiety. I mean, I saw a social media post a couple of weeks ago, and it was saying, this is what anxiety can look like, and it had about, not wanting to go out with your friends. So if your friends are ringing you and saying, oh, let's go out, and you're saying no, that's not them necessarily being awkward. It could be their anxiety. Or on the flip side, they could just be being awkward and not want to go out with you. So it's really hard, I think, to, if you don't know someone struggling with anxiety, to understand and sympathise, if that's the right word, with them, and empathise, probably a better word, I think.
Yeah, and it's and I wonder, so it's like we don't have this understanding in the same way, because it's been hidden for so long. And it's been able to bring it out of the shadows. And as you were talking, I do remember one of my tutors, I think it was my tutor or my therapist, saying sometimes if it looks like a heart attack, it could actually be a heart attack, like you were saying. If it rash, it could be that I'm allergic to something, simply in its own self.
Yeah, so to determine it as anxiety is almost, well, it's difficult, isn't it? And I think also there's an element of that I think there's still a potential stigma around anxiety, like, oh, if you're anxious, we kind of conjure up images of this very nervous little person that can't do anything, and that's not how anxiety. That's not what anxiety is. But I think there's, as a general, there's probably still a bit of a stigma around people that suffer with anxiety. I know when I started my business 5 years ago.
Wow, was it 5 years ago?
Yeah, I know.
God, it must be.
When I started, it was I'd left a job I knew well, you know, knew inside out. I was really comfortable, super confident. I'd just had my baby, so she was 8 months, I think, at the time, and my first baby as well. And I just something didn't feel right, and I could not put my finger on what was wrong. You know, I wasn't depressed, but I wasn't happy. I was stressed. I had that heavy feeling on my chest. My brain wasn't, you know, I couldn't function properly, you know. And it wasn't until somebody introduced me to a friend, went to a group session, we'll call it, and some of the other people in the room had really extreme experiences, you know, partners passing away and things, but there's some of the symptoms they were describing, and they were saying, you know, I'm really anxious, I'm suffering with anxiety, some of them obviously depression as well, and they talked about their symptoms and how they felt and what that made them do. And it wasn't until that point that I clicked and I went, oh, I'm anxious, I'm struggling with anxiety about everything, about being a new mum, about starting a business for the first time. But it took that discussion, that group discussion, for me to understand that's what because again, it's not something you talk about, is it? You know, I think and we should be talking about depression and everything else, and that's something that is talked about a lot, but I don't think anxiety, as an example, is, you know, and they're two separate things. So it's not like, I think sometimes they're grouped together, and they shouldn't always be, you know.
Sometimes they come together.
Mm.
Someone might have both, but yes, they are two separate things. And I wonder, yeah, because thinking about that's the stigma relating to anxiety, and it being judged if you can't cope.
Definitely.
So if somebody couldn't do something, because I noticed, yeah, if somebody couldn't do something because they'd broken their leg, or, you know, they're right-handed and their right arm's in a sling,
you could empathize easier.
Yeah, you say, oh, and you know, it's likely to be okay.
Yeah.
And people make adjustments and allowances and help. You wouldn't, someone who'd broken the leg, you wouldn't just leave them to walk across the room, or, you know, whatever they need to do. You'd see what help they needed. And yeah, it's just so important that it's helping people understand what it is. And it's hard, I suppose, for those that have never had it before, or don't relate to it in a sense of what that means.
I think it's hard. Sorry.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, I think it's following on from that point about it's hard for people that haven't experienced it or been around it. But I think even if you've experienced it, it can be difficult to relate to it, you know, because so if anxiety was a scale of 0 to 10, you know, I'd probably put my anxieties when they're at their worst, say 4 or 5, but some people I know are probably at the 10 level, and I still struggle to understand and fully understand and grasp what their thought processes are, or what might be going through their head, because to me it feels so alien. You know, as an example,
yeah,
you know, we were going on holiday a few years ago with some friends, and we had to get the ferry, and it was during the time of you know, a lot of the terrorist attacks and things. And for me, going on a ferry, I've got a little bit of anxiety about generally getting everyone together and getting on holiday, you know, nothing extreme. But some of my friends that we were going with genuinely were so anxious about maybe we were going to get the boat blown up by terrorists. And it was, you know, at the time I'm thinking, don't be so silly, you know, the chances of that are slim, you know. But so for me to really empathize was still is difficult, because I can't get that thought into my head. I can't think that's just a silly thought, but to them that is a genuine anxiety that they were really struggling with the whole boat journey. You know, it was really like, oh, you know, what happens, what are they doing, what's going to, you know. And I think that's why it's so difficult for us to know how to help, because what do you say, you know, if you've not been in that situation or had that thought, how do you know? Because for me saying to them, for example, oh, don't be silly, that's a silly thing, that's not going to happen. That's probably not a helpful comment to them who's thinking, I know it's probably not going to happen, but my anxieties are saying different, so it's, I think that's the difficulty, knowing that it's an issue and people are struggling with it and what that manifests like, but also what do you say and how do you help? Because like you say, if you've got someone who's got a broken leg, you can help them hobble across the road or whatever it is, but what do you say to people that are struggling with anxiety? And I don't know.
I can probably answer that, because as you were talking, I was reminded of, I don't know whether, I seem to have don't know whether this is a coincidence or not, but why this would be happening now, but working with quite a few clients on specific situational anxiety. So it could be about doing a presentation, it could be about exams, or those kinds of things where there's an anxiety about something, that. And so what I do with clients, and I think we can do this with each other, and I'm not so good at doing it outside of the clinical environment, but hopefully I'll get better at that. It's that if there's being a way to go, okay, let's reality check this. Yes, there's and you can be and acknowledge the things that are really serious. So if it's like, yes, there's been some terror attacks recently, and that idea is scary. On the ferry to, where did you say, the Isle of Wight?
France. We're going to France.
To France. Oh. On the ferry to France, what's the likelihood of this? And trying to do that, the reality of where they are. So it's not that there's no risk, but actually it's unlikely. And then there's the piece about how someone grounds themselves. And if we know the person really well, that can be really helpful, because feel your feet on the ground, or breathe out, do the breathing mentioned.
Well, there's that counting, isn't there? So point out 3 blue things in the room, or that kind of thing. We've used in class as well.
But just something about grounding, about being in the here and now reality, because when you've gone off on one in anxiety and panic, you're somewhere else. You're definitely not in your body. And it's that kind of, so that's that coping in that moment to get through that period of time. So if it's like a journey in that sense, if someone's having a panic attack in sense that, in that moment, that it's just there is no particular obvious end in sight. Have with the journey or an exam, that's very much about, again, you have to know them well enough to have physical contact and hold on to them, bringing them into here and now, and it would be breathing with them,
bringing them into the moment,
and say, breathe with me, and so they're concentrating on mine,
and not in their own head. That makes sense. And I think that's really useful, because I don't think I wouldn't have known that, and I've struggled with anxiety, and I've been around people that have had extreme anxiety, and I think there's things that my friends have said to me, this helps me when I'm in that situation, but you've got to know them well enough to be able to have those open conversations. And certainly with my friends that have shared with me in the past, it has been a big thing to share, maybe because of the stigma, maybe because of what you were saying earlier around feeling feeling not I can't think what the word is, kind of not good enough, kind of feeling like it's a weakness almost. I think we've got to get past that, and I think if more of us know how to help, if more of us know that a huge amount of people suffer with anxiety in silence, for starters, I think is useful to know. But also then, if it's also useful to know some of those tips and techniques that you've just said to help if we're seeing friends, family, even ourselves, even getting into that state. Okay, how can I help this person? And I think that's useful to know.
And I probably should add, I don't know if this came across in the reality check, it's sort of encouraging the person to say it for themselves. So I would say, so what is the likelihood that it's going to happen, really? And challenge them gently, but it's like bringing them into the reality of it.
Yeah, you're not telling them, you're guiding them for them
Yeah.
to change their own thoughts in that moment. Yeah,
to bring that part of the brain, the rational part that can do that kind of calculation, bring it into the conversation that's going on into the brain at the time. And another symptom of anxiety I'll just bring in really quickly that's similar to panic, but I know it's definitely happened to me twice in my life, probably more, and I wonder how often it's happened. There could be a particular scenario. I won't describe it. I'm not really interested in the world knowing what it is because it's not relevant. But it's a scenario I know, and it happens to me, where it's something completely out of my control. There's something called dissociate, and dissociate has many meanings. There's the one where you're kind of daydreaming, which I'm, can pass the time quite happily, help me get to sleep.
Nice.
And there's the one you have no control over, where your brain just, and for me, it's like, when you're gonna, it's back in, I don't think it does it now. In the old days, you're gonna chat the fuzzy thing on your telly.
Oh yeah.
It's almost like, it's like that. It feels like that, and I know that's a sound, but it has a feeling like that. And I think and you disappear.
Oh.
It's like your brain's gone into reboot, or just as my screen just did then, just and just need to bring it back. And I don't know, and you had no idea in those time frames how long you'd be absent for. And I only realised once, and a friend of mine I think witnessed it, and I didn't say anything. I don't think I quite appreciated what just happened at the time. Whereas I think I would have frozen mid-sentence, or just frozen. I think I'd seen something on my phone. I'd frozen, which was a trigger event. I'd frozen, and my friend then said, "Oh well, if you," and said, "Well, if you don't want to talk about it or something, whatever we're talking about," as if I'd not said anything for a really long time or ignored them. And I don't know how long that period was, because when you're absent, you don't know you're absent for that period of time. And that's that dissociation, which is just the brain going, can't cope, I'm going to turn the light out.
I suppose it's a bit like when your electric's over, there's too many plugs plugged in. And
exactly, yes.
A bulb goes, that's too much, I can't cope, I'm going to blow,
And and it blows, fuse blows,
and it needs time to reset itself.
And these are extreme triggers. So go on, you're going to ask.
I don't know, I think the thought's gone.
Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I think it was something to do with like having too many tabs open in your brain and having to shut some of them down. But I can't remember what the thought was that I was going to say.
Right. And that's due to that. It's terror for me. Again, this is a thing about anxiety, is a particular scenario that sends me to this terror. I get, I can assume, and I don't believe it happens to me very often, because I think I'd know the scenario. You see what I mean? And
you could be aware of it. Well, I was just going to say, I think it's again, those triggers might be to somebody else a really small trigger because they've not had the experience, for instance, that you've had. So as an example, when I was, how old was I must have been 14, 15. I had a stalker, so at 6 o'clock every night on the dot, he would ring my house phone. At the time, it was before well, it was just as I was getting a mobile, that sort of time, 6 o'clock every night on the dot, and he'd be quite horrible, let's just say. And that went on for a good year. My dad got the police involved and everything else. Anyway, it finally stopped. But for a good few years after, a phone ringing. I mean, even now, I'm talking 20 years ago now. For a phone ringing, that traditional phone noise, really, and I have to stop and go, and I think something that can seem quite, because my friends would be like, I'd be like, answer the phone, and they'd be like, calm down, it's just a phone. To them it's just a phone call. But something that seems quite trivial to some people is not so trivial to other people, because it's become a trigger for anxieties, and I think it's going you saying you're looking at your phone and something has triggered something which your friend might not appreciate is actually a a scenario which is not great, because to her something on your phone is probably just fine,
Yeah. And actually as well for the and I know from that situation they didn't even know, because the shame of what was associated with this thing on my phone, there's no way, it just wouldn't have said anything about it
with them.
No. And by the way, this thing I'm talking about, again, this is shame that I'm not talking about what it is. And I'm not. I'm not going to, by the end of this, have told you what it is.
Yeah, I think it's, and I suppose it's then, is it the scenario which sets off the anxiety for you, or is it the shame that sets off the anxiety for you, or is it a combination of both? I mean, I don't know.
No, it's an excellent question. I don't really know. I know why. I do know why, and what that's done, that knowledge, and it comes on to therapy, so probably feels like a good place to start, is that I know why, and knowing that through therapy is
priceless.
Wasn't it? Priceless, yes. I'll try and explain what just goes in my head, because I was trying to think what I was about to say next. Is going to therapy, what difference does it make? Does it make it okay? Okay feels like the wrong word. That's the thought process that just went on then when I was going. Is it there is some shame around it about, and probably yes, I think that is a place when it is entangled, because there is some shame, and it's but the shame has, if there's something happened to me, and then ever since that through my life has been impacted by that event, and it's the shame about the subsequent stuff, not about the thing that happened at the moment, at the time. And which isn't necessarily always the case. This is it's a bit entangled, but it's just and what therapy's done is sort of having that knowledge. I guess it's not so scary. It's really hard to put into words, and I wonder if it's going to happen ever again. Will it happen ever again? Now since I identified this dissociation, I haven't had one since. Go on, you were going to say.
I was just going to say, is it, I think with anything, things are scary when we don't understand them or know them. And I think through therapy, because that group session that I went on years ago was a type of therapy, and actually again, it's having the awareness and understanding of something and why we've got to where we are, like you say, makes it less scary, so that hopefully if a similar sort of situation arises, we're aware of how we might react, so that we can pre-manage that, if that's the right phrase. And I think that's why therapy in whatever guise is useful, because I think it's not going to fix, that's not the right phrase, it's not going to, you can't go back and redo that situation so that it's not, so it's fixed, but you can hopefully learn the tools, techniques and management and understanding, the knowledge to manage things going forward, I think.
And you're right, and notice your hesitance over fixed, because yes, we can't change history, but what our brain's doing when we have anxiety, when we have panic, is replaying the feeling from that time. And actually, by a sense of replaying it through therapy, which might be once, it might be several times, going over the same thing over and over, what the brain is doing is putting it in the right part of your brain that's in historic memory, because I always forget the names of the bits of the brain, but the brain that's in the here and now, it's putting it in the filing cabinet. So instead of it just being on the table, just being a mess all the time, and you're seeing it all the time, it goes in the cabinet, metaphorically, so that you can never change the history of something that happened to you or your experience, but what you can do is how it manifests itself now. And and whether that's in the one-to-one therapy, the stuff I do, like I say, doing group things, being part of a support group, being just finding someone who gets it and understands.
I think
can be.
I think it's the power of talking, being in an environment where you feel comfortable enough to talk about a situation. It's almost like kind of, when you were younger and your parents say you need to face your fears head on, and I think it's it's kind of an element of that, not that you're facing the fear head on, but you are addressing it out in the open in a safe environment, so that you can reflect on it, so that it, hopefully doesn't impact going forward, or the impact is minimalized. I think it's interesting. I think it's useful for people to understand, and I hope this discussion is useful for people to understand a little bit more about anxiety, and how we all can be a little bit more aware, open with it. I think.
No, I agree. And so one thing about therapy for anxiety that I find really hard is it takes a long time. I can't remember exactly how long. I would say a year. I say a year, but I'm never really sure if it's a year into my own personal therapy, was when I had that day when I didn't feel anxious for the first time, that probably, I won't say in my life, but I could ever remember. And then this sudden realization of that's how I'd been. I didn't even go to therapy with anxiety, didn't know I had it. Just that, I was doing it for the course, but equally I knew that something wasn't right, and that's where I went. And that's the hardest thing with clients who are coming to see me with anxiety, and it's an awful feeling, and the thing is I can relate to it, so, and I always say that to clients, is I know what it's, and it can be fixed, and I'm not completely cured, but then when it's not the same.
You handle it differently, if that's the right phrase. And I think, sorry,
no, so I'd let you go. Just finish this bit, the sentence of, because it's important to say, in that it's not that I still have anxiety and I know what it is. I don't have it on very, very much on the whole. When I have something that's a rash on my neck, or a feel that's like when I recorded the thing for East Midlands today, that's why I wouldn't say I'm not completely cured, but when I know it's a signal and I know what's going on, and usually I go, right, I know, what do I need to do now? And I acknowledge it, and I kind of comfort myself. It's like, I know it's really scary, but it's going to be okay. The thing that you think is going to happen won't, as if I was speaking to a child.
And I think you're right. I think it's that element of the anxiety. There are going to be so many situations through your life, whether you're suffering anxiety generally or not, that can make you anxious. So it's never going to be something that completely goes. It's learning how to acknowledge it, knowing what your triggers are, and again, like I say, minimizing those risks. And I think there's probably a lot of people that are a bit like me and you. I didn't know it was anxiety I just knew something wasn't right, when I went for my group session. And I think there's probably a lot of people that are in that same boat. They just know something's not quite right, but they're not sure what. So I think that's why talking is a good tool.
Yeah, I agree. Super. Thanks for that.
That's all right.
Anything you wanted to say that you haven't had the opportunity to?
No, I don't think so. Backwards, I think it was particularly good because we managed to talk through a little bit through what anxiety is, a little bit through what it looks like, and also maybe even touch on these are the sort of things you can do to help. But it's true, isn't it? I think it's because it's whether it's therapy with a therapist, or whether it's a group, support groups or whatever, I think it is useful. So it's because actually that is actually genuinely a massive help, just to acknowledge it and say it out loud sometimes.
So I hope you enjoyed listening to Jade and I talk about anxiety, and hopefully it's made a little bit of difference to your knowledge and understanding of what anxiety is and what we actually might be able to do about it for ourselves and for others. If you'd like to book an appointment just to find out more and if counselling's for you and if it might be able to help with your anxiety or your something doesn't feel quite right, please just go ahead and book. You can go to the Counselling West Bridgford website and book your free, no obligation initial consultation there, and I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to see more of our videos, because I do lots of these conversations with and intend to do more, please do subscribe to the channel, and we're on Facebook and Instagram too if you want to see what I'm up to there. Okay, bye now.